Okay, so we have two extraordinary women joining us in this episode today. Lorri Slash is the Senior Director of Human Resources at JFSA Cleveland. Lorri's educational background is quite diverse and interdisciplinary. A BA in education and an MA in sports studies, and you started your career in the education space and have since gone on, and now you're in the human resources spot, and you're obviously the author of one of the contributors to the 6th level, which we'll get talking about in a second. And then Dr. Stacy Feiner, a Hobart and William Smith graduate, went on to get your Doctor of Psychology from the Illinois School of Professional Psychology. And you've had a successful career initially in corporate America, and then you went on to launch your own venture, Feiner Enterprises, which looks to work with and support family-owned businesses and growing and actually addressing the very dynamics that are holding them back. Stacey and Lorri, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it.
We are glad to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to
we've been
have
here
you.
all weekend, and now this is the caps.
It's been a busy weekend for both of you.
Yeah.
You've had the book event, you've had a little party at your place, and then obviously we've had Jack Harris's retirement party, one of your co-authors. So it's been eventful here in Geneva, New York. But yeah, guys, I want to get started by talking about the book, of course, the 6th level. I'm wondering if you can give me, from each of your perspectives, a rundown of what the 6th level is for our audience. What is it? Give us a little quick rundown.
Well, Reese, it's really great to be here, and I just want to kindly say it's the 6th level. The 6th level.
Thank you.
No.
The accent.
No, just because it has a little bit of a different connotation with your accent.
Mm-hmm.
So the 6th level capitalized on the power of women's psychology for sustainable leadership.
Mm-hmm.
It's a book that came to fruition. We got it published on November 30th, and that was kind of phase 1. Phase 2 was to get it publicized, and we were awarded bestseller on Amazon in 3 different categories: business management, gender studies, and decision making.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a leadership book that, it's a new leadership book. We're presenting and asserting a new model that goes beyond command and control to the 6th level, where communities and organizations have the opportunity to have healthy social dynamics that lead to success, profitability, and sustainability for businesses.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Lorri, anything to add on your front?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the content of the book, I love that you can almost start the book anywhere. It isn't a cover-to-cover necessity read. It has workshop ideas in it. It has real ground floor experiences by all of the contributors, including myself, taking moments of leadership out and sharing it with others, along with all the background, the scientific background, the studies, that the authors bring to the table to help it resonate beyond us.
Definitely. I want to go back and really go back to like the inception of this book. Where did it really come to be? Who came up with the idea? How did it grow into what it's become, right? Because you've got so many contributors, you've got your co-authors, and really it's really been a movement, and that's what you guys market it as well, is this movement that is really people are getting behind, and it seems to have a big support right now. So I'm curious about how it even got to where it is today.
Well, probably all of us have a different, entry point into this book, and so there are 4 authors: Stacy Feiner, Dr. Jack Harris, Dr. Kathy Overbeck, and Rachel Wallace Andreasen. It's interesting. I come from a psychology background. Obviously, Jack is from a sociology background. Kathy is from a research background, and Rachel is she's a heavy hitter in the family business space. This weekend, she's working with her family business on succession planning to the 3rd generation. So we bring a lot of perspectives to the concept of a new leadership model. Where we come together as philosophically is we all believe in the 6th level and bringing communities into mutuality, where empathy really turns into this two-way sense of reciprocity. So where where leaders have the opportunity to engage their employees and their ecosystem in a way that is intrinsically rewarding to them. So we don't just show up. These leaders didn't just show up because we had a good idea. We are very compelled to accomplish. We were very compelled to accomplish this book. I can speak for myself. It was, it's 55 years in the making. It takes a lifetime to create something that you want to have a lasting impact. The book is based on the Stone Center theory of self and relation. Dr. Jean Baker Miller in 1971 wrote a book called Toward a New Psychology of Women. And she talks about a concept called self and relation. It goes beyond Maslow's fifth level, which is self-actualization, which is really kind of a self-centered position where you are learning to achieve your own potential. The sixth level is when you are interested in learning from others and the world around you, and you have this reciprocity, emotional reciprocity. And that's been missing from leadership. All of us, I think, in the 16 contributors, which Lorri is one, and Lorri contributed to the mutuality chapter, and that's one of the 4 core differentiators. And all of the contributors are writing essays that exemplify, that prove the theory. So we have the theory at the beginning, and then we have the essays that prove the theory, and it goes both ways. And for a lot of us, we were finally giving words and names to the kind of leadership that we were practicing, and that was really the most exciting thing, is that there's a name for our leadership. So it started back when we discovered Jean Baker Miller's work, and then of course I took a class with Jack Harris. His classes, I believe, change people's lives, and everybody needs to have a Jack Harris class. So it was really important to have his contribution to the book. Now everybody who reads the book can take a class or a version of Jack's class, and I think they will be changed because of it. We look at leadership, and we say that leadership has come as far as it has come because of contributors like Jim Collins, because of leaders like Richard Boyatzis, because of leaders like, lots of leaders who have contributed to where we are today. But the 6th level, again, proves that leadership theories are based on men's psychology. And so women's thinking and women's lens has been missing from leadership. And therefore, we've really been practicing incomplete leadership models. Leadership models that are not fully developed. And so we're interested in expanding leadership into the 6th level. Definitely.
Amazing. Lorri, I want to touch a little bit on your side, being approached and asked to contribute to the book. Initially, what were your thoughts at the time? Also, at what stage was the 6th level at when you were approached to contribute? Were you one of those initial contributors that I know you then went back and asked them to do it again and redrafts and really looked at it a different way during the writing process? So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that story.
Yeah, well, I have the good fortune to have known Stacy for a long time, personally and professionally. So I am not like the other contributing authors. I was actually in on the ground floor with a group of authors as we started to think about what this could look like. And one of the things that was interesting when you have 4 people coming together, like Stacy said, with different experiences, research-based information and disciplines, each of them with their own thoughts on what women's leadership would be like. That's when we said, well, we need to test out this theory and find out. And the only way to do it, as Kathy said, well, we don't have time to whip together a scientific study and wait 20 years to see if it's going to work. And how do you accelerate? I think it's very entrepreneurial of us to say, let's accelerate a scientific theory by asking people to contribute their leadership stories to us to see if they fit the model. And I liked the idea of a blind study. I was probably the only one that wasn't in the blind study because I thought of the idea of doing the blind study, I think, of saying, listen, just contribute your stories. We gave a prompt. And then we did realize that it fit within the model we thought. And then together we moved along to hone those theories and hone those ideas and test them. We tried lots of different words of what it meant. We had to define what each of the 4 core differentiators meant. And that was actually with a very large group of people. Someone asked us the other day, well, how did you get everybody together? How did you do it? And I said, Zoom. Right. I don't know how else you're going to get everybody together. So that was that technology allowed us to expedite the process of the book, quite frankly. So I do have to credit that, video conferencing.
Yes, definitely. I want you to talk a little bit. So I was speaking to an author a few months ago, and he was talking. He was a fresh author. He's only written 1 book, and he was talking about going through the process of his writing. Which I'm sure you both can identify with as a bit of a nightmare at times. But he was talking about, trying to figure out and almost try to overcome the imposter syndrome that comes with trying to be a first-time author. And he was saying that during the process, he was starting to think of all these questions of, not only is this a good book to write, is it one that deserves to be read? And then also, who is it that he's writing it for? And is he the correct person to be writing it? And I'm curious about, firstly, who were you writing the 6th level for? Who should be reading this and who should be taking the lessons from it and that it holds? But also, why were you and everyone that you got on board behind this the right people to contribute to this and to write it?
It's a great question. So it's a couple questions in one. So as Lorri has said, the book can be read from started at any chapter. You can start in on this book from wherever you're most interested. There is a set of essays written by emerging leaders. So there are several sections to the book. There's the front of the book, which talks about theory, self and relation theory, sociology, and gender studies and business. And then there's the leadership sections. Then we have contributors, and the first 2 contributors are emerging leaders. Sam Allen, who's a graduate of Hobart, and Kirby Gilmore, I think she's a Case Western student, and now she's at Stanford University doing some research. And the book is so layered. We could talk about it from so many different directions, but really the book started as these emerging leaders needed a new leadership model that would serve them in the future. And as I've just mentioned, current traditional leadership models are really incomplete. They don't include the lens of women. So we really only have incomplete models of leadership to use, and they're not sufficient. We can see this. They're not sufficient. And they're certainly not sufficient for the future. So we asked these emerging leaders to tell us what they wanted to know or what questions they had so that the seasoned leaders who make up the rest of the book, the 16 essays, could respond to those needs, to answer those questions. So it really is in part a Q&A. Right. The essays from the emerging leaders to the senior leaders and the senior leaders answering back. So that is fundamental to the book. So the book is really written for emerging leaders, a leadership model that can serve them for the future. It's beyond command and control. It moves beyond dominance. And we have the 4 core differentiators, which emerged from the research that I was doing in my coaching work prior to our writing the book. So that's one group. It's also written for men. It's interesting in our culture, sad maybe, that we have come to a place where really men don't believe that they can learn anything from women. So when we present this book and it's titled The 6th Level, the Capitalize on the Power of Women's Psychology for Sustainable Leadership, men leaders look at that book, CEOs, and say, I'm going to get this book for my daughter, which is wonderful. And I'm glad that dads are thinking about their daughters and leadership. Or I'm going to get this book for my, for the women's affiliation group or, in my affinity group in my organization. But when they see a book oriented with the lens of women, they don't see it as relevant to them. So this is a problem, right? That I think first and foremost, men leaders need to see that there's a lot that they can learn from women. Also, to really change the way that they approach and see relationships of people in their organizations. And it also is a book written for women leaders because there are a lot of aha moments when women read this book. There was a woman actually at the event. We had a book signing here at William Smith and Hobart Colleges in the Garin Center, sponsored by the Centennial Center. Thank you.
Of course.
And the Office of the William Smith Dean. And she said that when she read chapter 1, it was difficult for her to get through. She cried while she read it because she finally had words for her experience. Huh. So this book is written for all of us who are hungry for a better way of leading. And I'll just say one other thing. You know, when we think about where we are in leadership today, this book is really on the shoulders of many leaders who have come before us and really brought emotional intelligence. Right. So that's a huge step, that emotional intelligence and empathy is a superpower in business. It also gave us the opportunity and the gateway and to pave the way for something called mutuality, which I mentioned, which is two-way empathy. Right. So it's really empathy on human steroids, right? Natural, organic capacity for mutuality. So leaders who are hungry for a new way of leading have this opportunity. And again, it goes beyond traditional leadership to something new.
Definitely, 100%. Lorri, what about in your eyes, especially the part that you contributed to, the mutuality part? Who do you want to read that, and who do you want to really pull lessons from that moving forward?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I've done in my work, whatever my role is, because I've had a variety of roles, I do consider myself as a change agent, a catalyst, where, you try things and you wait for a reaction and you say, oh, no one listened to that one. So what's another methodology of getting information forward and upward? A lot of people write upward into the organization. I'm not a CEO of any organization, nor have I been. And the idea that anybody can start a change movement should come out of this book. Don't wait to be at whatever title you think you need to have to make change. Yeah. And the best way to make change isn't starting at the top. I think Jack said yesterday, organizations should flip that pyramid, right? Exactly, from the bottom up. So if leaders are reading it, and if new generations of folks coming into the workforce, and I say folks because, we talked about this book. Is it a women's book? Is it a men's book? Is it a them book? Is it a they book? It is all. And so wherever you're entering into the workforce, if it moves from the bottom up and the top down, just think how fast change can happen. If change only goes from the bottom to the top, you have to wait for it to get there, and top to the bottom, you're waiting for it. So our idea was, let's use the sandwich model, get it from the bottom and the top, and see if we can expedite change, faster and make it more meaningful for both ends of the spectrum.
I love it. As you both sort of spoke about, the book argues really for this more emotional approach to leadership, right? One that really thinks about the person and not just the results, right? And I think that's a really, really important point. And I think it is something that people need to understand, right? Is that actually caring about your people and fostering growth for them will ultimately result in better results, right? I'm curious about, for you, and after writing this book, what do you feel people like myself and the next generation coming up who will be the future leaders, what must we prepare for, and what must we really adopt in terms of skills and abilities to be the best leaders?
So, going back to the structure of the book, and again, it's a great question, Reese. So the book, just to be really clear, it's a starting point, right? It's, but it's a living document. So we have some stuff that's historical and even a lot of irony in, humanity. So we have some things that are, fundamental and grounded.
Right.
Then we are trying new things. This is a new leadership model. There are 4 core differentiators: mutuality, ingenuity, justness, and intrinsic motivation. And when these core 4 differentiators are practiced collectively, the chances of equitable environments are created. So it's part of a leader. It's partly qualities of the leader. It's partly a set of qualities for leadership.
Mm-hmm.
They're also the conditions that environments flourish in. So these 4 differentiators create an environment for people to be, have healthy social dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
The end of the book, the chapter 9 and the afterwards, is the vision for the future. So, and I must say too, at the end of each one of the chapters of the 4 core differentiators, there are reflective questions and there's a summary of what the leaders demonstrated for the readers to grasp and to hold on to. So we distill the stories in a summary from each of the chapters, and then we provide reflective questions. So this is an interactive book, right? It provides some history, challenges to the contemporary leadership, and then these interactive questions with the content. And then at the end, the vision for the future. So the vision for the future is really what we have to begin to imagine together, a new vision for the future. And these 4 core differentiators are, they allow for all worthy missions to be successful. And so, I would just say really, it is the vision for how businesses can perform that go beyond quarterly earnings and stay focused on when people want to be in the place that they're in, when they are intrinsically motivated to go above and beyond their own self-interest to serve the needs of many. We become less self-focused, right? We become focused on the needs of others, the long-term goals of the organization, the sustainability, the gentleness to the earth and to each other and to generations that are not here. So, I mean, it's a multiplier. The book is a multiplier, and that's what I think is really important for readers to understand.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to take a little different perspective. That is all true. I'm thinking about my adult children who are graduating and getting out into the workforce and how they are going to select the places that they are going to choose to work, not only the fields, but the culture they're going to walk into. And I think one of the worst experiences we have had is, interviewing and getting into organizations. And organizations have not been very good at interviewing people to make sure they're the right fit. We talk about that all the time. What's the right fit for this organization? And it's hard because you're speed dating. You haven't even met the person, and now you're meeting an organization. So how are you going to make that selection? I would encourage folks coming into the workforce, if they read our book, to try to think of questions that you'd like to ask an organization or an individual who's interviewing you. That will educate them as well. I have learned a lot as an HR person in HR, interviewing hundreds and thousands of people. People that ask really good questions get me to question the way we are operating. And you might not get the job, but you might change that organization and never really know it. So it'll be a gift you'll give to yourself and others. But asking people, so what leadership books have you read? How do you create an environment of mutuality? Use a word out of our book and see what the response is. Try to get better at those questions to see if you're going to fit into the culture or be allowed to have ideas about making it better. Having your ideas heard. The generations that are at work, there's 5 or 6 by now, they all have their opinions on what work means. And the definition of work and meetings and all those things, and they're not aligned. And people coming into an organization want to immediately make a difference. And most people say, well, listen, you haven't been around, get your bearings first. You haven't been around here long enough to have an opinion about anything. I've heard that over and over again for people who are within organizations, and it's a turnoff. And they don't realize they're not mentoring. They think they're mentoring, like that's their advice, and it's falling on deaf ears. So again, reading the book or any leadership book that you've read and ask if they're reading books. How does professional development work? Is there a mentorship program? We used to ask the question, where do you want to be in 5 years? So I think we can't wait for 5 years when people are in jobs for 18 months. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
I like that. Yeah, I love that. So coming off of that, I want to talk about these systematic barriers, right, that are in place. I mean, obviously there are strides being made for a more equitable workforce, right, and there is more emphasis on that. However, I think it is clear, and everyone is aware of the systematic barriers that are still in place, particularly for women, right, and this is something that I know both of you are very vocal about. And so I'm curious about, in your own life, where have you witnessed those systematic barriers? Where have you seen maybe rooms that you deserve to be in, but maybe you weren't allowed to be in for whatever reason? And maybe you weren't being heard for whatever reason. I'm curious about if you can tell us those stories.
You know, as a feminist, and as a feminist, it's, and I graduated college in 86. I really didn't like to imagine myself being left out of circles. I really didn't like the truth of it. So I really kind of denied it. And I really thought I knew that there was suffering, but I wasn't one suffering. I was pioneering. So I much preferred to think of myself as a pioneer. I do remember a situation I had the opportunity in an organization that had just been sold to a new company, and we were $500,000 down in our goals. And I showed up to the office of the two presidents, the chairman and the president, CEO and president, and I said, I think my coaching practice within this company could capture that $500,000. I think if we were strategic and you as the leaders facilitated these conversations with your best clients, I could certainly find coaching opportunities for them, for their employees, for their boards, or even their families, this whole ecosystem of coaching. And we could capture in a short period of time that deficit. And I just remember the smug smirks, that they laid on me, right? And said, no, I don't think we have anybody to introduce you to. Now, these are people I worked for and worked with. And that was later in my career, probably, And so that's an example of a slight. You can't really put your finger on it. Certainly couldn't take it to court. Not that would be something that I was thinking about, but it's all of those kind of subtle nuance being left out of the room. I think if I could say, it's kind of cock blocking, that term. So those kinds of things really fueled me and fired me. I mean, I ultimately went into my own entrepreneurial business because running my own business, I faced that less. I faced that potentially with prospective clients, and they didn't hire me if that was a problem, which of course is unfortunate because they needed me more, right? So that's one experience of just and mindset of facing the barriers. In terms of the book, really, there are three really important things that we brought to the book. One is we uncovered research by women at the Stone Center at Wellesley College, brilliant women, 1971, writing new theory about women's psychology, going against Eric Kohlberg's model of morality. Carol Gilligan was a student of his. He was misinterpreting the data, ended up calling women less moral than men based on his skewed interpretation of the data, and it infuriated her, and she wrote a book called In a Different Voice. So there was just such an inflection point at that period of time, even on this campus with Rebecca Fox being our William Smith Dean. I mean, we were on fire. Women's language and women's ideas really were starting to be infused. And then over the last 40 years, it's been decimated, and it probably in a very calculated way. It's been written about. There's a book called The Patriarch, which is also a great story about how patriarchy has persisted over the centuries and the millennia. Anyway, back to your question. How does the book address the barriers? The first one is to surface research that has been silenced and sidelined and not published because it was qualitative, not quantitative. So the research by the Stone Center, self and relation theory, mutuality, connection, all of these women's ways in connection. All of these things are critical. And so we helped surface that research. The second thing the book does is it gives a vision of what women are doing and men are doing in terms of leadership. It's happening now. We're operating under the radar screen. So there's this opportunity to tap in. I think people who are feeling barriers need to find ways to tap in to this sixth level and elevate it from kind of under the radar into kind of the visible world of leadership. So that's the second thing. And the third thing, to Lori's point, there is this silent majority that is becoming more connected and more outspoken, and the barriers are being broken. It's interesting. I would just say this one thing: the more the barriers are broken, the more patriarchy clamps down and divides us. So we have opportunities now to have our own unique identities. There are plenty of identities to choose from. However, choosing an identity now is has a polarizing effect. And that was not the intention of uncovering identities. Uncovering identities were supposed to bring us together, not polarize us. So the third part of the book is also, it asks the reader to step out of patriarchy for the first time, to collectively evaluate, examine, dissect the dangers and the poor performance of patriarchy, and to create something new. So we really are trying to use these 4 core differentiators where patriarchy cannot, or dominance cannot, coexist with the 4 core differentiators. And I think as we practice this collectively and we start this movement, and we invite people, so www.thesixthlevel.com. We are building a community, and we're in the process this weekend, actually at the author's condo. We were thinking about answering the questions of your audience. So your students asked really brilliant questions and is pushing us to find ways. How do we now respond to the request of getting involved? So we are. Please visit the website. There's plenty of opportunities to add your insights and questions and expectations, and we need them so that we can serve up something better. So yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for the question, Reese.
Of course. Lori, anything to add on your front?
So again, you've mentioned, my career path is not linear. And I credit that to seeking opportunities that maybe were not, obvious at the time. I graduated with a degree in education and went into teaching. I actually taught in an all-girls school, private school, and learned a lot about that and enjoyed that. And then thought, what's next? And you're talking about barriers. So looking at, I was teaching predominantly environmental science, actually, in biology. And most people said, well, you should go and, get a master's degree in biology and go and teach biology because, women, I was told a lot of women going to biology, men were going into chemistry at the time, that kind of thing. But a good friend of mine said, I think you should check out athletic administration. I said, you mean like at schools where they, all of them are football coaches, basketball coaches, and wrestling coaches? And they said, yes, there's a degree actually coming out in this field because that model isn't working anymore. This idea that if you're a basketball coach and need a full-time job, you can become an athletic director. So I thought, that's great. So I found an avenue to go get a degree in that and go out into the world and see if I could become one of those folks in an athletic department that wasn't a football coach, a basketball coach, or a wrestling coach. I had grown up playing sports. I mean, I was a 12-letter athlete recipient in high school, which there aren't anymore. But that was my first taste of saying, listen, there's opportunities here that don't necessarily meet the eye. There are avenues coming up, and I should try to be aware of those. So that was my first taste of going into maybe a more male-dominated environment and seeing what that looked like from that perspective. But I have had, time working in an organization when I've presented an idea and someone, said that's not a great idea like Stacy's had, or they've taken it upon themselves to assume that that was their idea in a meeting and not mine, quickly realizing that not to share those ideas with that individual maybe, And that was a challenging time to say, well, now what? So I think we do have to be aware when, you know, and by the way, when asked about it, the response was what I thought that it would get a better response if he said the idea versus myself, that it would be accepted and move forward.
Wow.
So I think that opened my eyes. That moment opened my eyes, for sure.
Definitely. Stacey, I want to go back to you and ask you about a story from when you were a student here. The bookstore and the magazines, the Playboy magazines that they had on show when you first entered the door when you were a student. This is something that you were very vocal about, and you lobbied the HWS bookstore to ensure that this was removed. I'm curious if you can tell me a little bit more about that. Like, what was it that, you know, after walking into the bookstore and seeing that made you think, you know, let me be the person to change this?
When you start in college, when I started in college, I started with a lot of idealism, and I had parents who really encouraged me to think for myself. I wrote a chapter in a book called Standing O. It's an anthology that was collected by Scott McGregor. I encourage everybody to read it. It's a great book. And I had the opportunity to kind of get these ideas out. And what I remember is, you know, probably the quote that follows me in my life is, just because a million people think something is a good idea doesn't make it a good idea. So I'm really not somebody who followed the masses. You know, once an idea is followed blindly by the masses, it loses its intention and it gets diluted and gets jargonized. And anyway, when I came onto campus, I was very idealistic. I had a lot of idealism. And when I saw things that were blatantly wrong, I felt it was my responsibility. That's kind of a big way of saying it. I don't know if I felt it was a responsibility as much as it was an impulse. That was wrong, and I should do something about it. Mind you, I wasn't alone in this. I had my compatriots. And I think that's a big part of the process, too, is when you have a group of people who share certain ideals that you can kind of work together to make the world better and righter. And there were men who participated in this process with us. There were men who felt that was wrong. And I think there was also just an energy, right, about getting on campus and doing something together that was right. So it was kind of easy in the sense that pornography is damaging. It is dangerous. It is violent. It has one lens of, you know, kind of a perverted sexuality that's not from the lens of health. So anyway, it was a kind of an easy thing to identify as not being good. And then with idealism and colleagues and a place that was responsive to change, we had a great experience because of it. Yeah. And we were listened to. So it was wonderful. Jack Harris taught me in his class. The beautiful thing about Jack was he engaged even the least developed ideals. So you could share and spew, you know, in all of your questions or all of your frustration, your idealism. And he would say, that sounds like this. And it turned into a belief. So I could turn my ideals into a belief system that I could live by and I could act on. And I think that was the beautiful part of being on campus around that time, was that this school, Hobart and William Smith, really aided students in taking their ideals, shifting them into meaningful belief systems that we could live by and then act on.
Right.
So I felt very empowered. And I think for the rest of my life, really, because of the school, you know, and that quote from my parents, you know, I think I was really destined to write the book and to be an activist for others to make the world a better place. I mean, there's such great opportunity on the planet when people work together. And beautiful chapters. There's one chapter where Jennifer Fondervey is introducing these kinds of concepts: mutuality, empathy, people-centric in the in the field of mergers and acquisitions. Mergers and acquisitions, when they don't pay attention to the people dynamic, have a 75% failure rate after the deal closes. Now, that might work for the deal makers, but for the sellers and the buyers and the people involved, it's diminishing returns, right? The buyer has a need for the company to be successful long term. The seller, typically financially connected over time for a period of time, has a need for the financials to work. So the business really does need to be carried forward with these kinds of ideals so everybody wins. Ingenuity, just as a matter of fact, is defined as the ability to solve complex problems with novel solutions that serve the interests of many. So that's what women contribute to the species when we're given a chance. Whereas our men brethren, the psychology is that you solve linearly a problem that serves the needs of the specific based on precedent. So you can see there's a real difference. And when they're merged, we have a real opportunity to serve the interests of many.
Definitely. No, I love it. I mean, especially, of course, Jack Harris, who is a professor that we all have much love for. And obviously yesterday was his retirement party after a successful 50-year career at Hobart and William Smith, which, he's seen many students come through the institution and has supported them in many ways. But Hobart and William Smith is this amazing place, as you've mentioned, right? Like, sure, this Playboy magazine situation, it was wrong, okay, that the bookstore had that, but this was a place, both at that time and now, where there are people on this campus that if you think something's wrong, you can go to them and they will support you and they will help you and they will come together in helping you correct that wrong.
They were responsive, right? And they opened a conversation. It wasn't that any idea that a student brought, right? But when we had a strong opinion, they formulated it into a discussion, a thoughtful discussion that then we could find solutions together.
Right.
So yes,
exactly. And yeah, I just think it's great, especially with the faculty members and the staff members we have here on campus and the mentorship you get from those types of folks at Hobart and William Smith is really transformational and it can really impact change. And I mean, even looking at it now, Stacy, you coming back as an alum and one of Jack's former students, now writing a book with him. So,
well, I'll just say Kathy Overbeck, who's one of the authors, was here yesterday at Jack's retirement party, and she shouted, at the retirement party, that what is Hobart William Smith is what's the school's loss is our gain, because certainly the book will be gaining traction because of Jack's contribution, major contribution, and we will be able to engage the discourse, the public discourse, more broadly with his contribution. He really speaks to men and women, but he's so compelling with the ways that he brings people along. So
100%.
Great.
That's exciting.
We have that in common.
Yeah, definitely. Lorri, I want to come back briefly to your experience, and as we've outlined, right, you've had quite a diverse experience, and you've really went all full steam ahead on really trying to break down those systematic barriers in your career and through the things that you've done and the ventures that you've taken on. With this, I'm curious about asking you whether we should be specialists or generalists, especially in the modern day and in the future, as we are seeing the technological advancements accelerate at the rate in which they are. Should we really, the next generation, be adopting the qualities of someone who can generalize, someone who has this interdisciplinary approach and can bring people together and understand this together from different fields? Or do you think that specializing in one area and mastering that is the initial route people should take? And
can I add one piece to that? Sure. Because I think there's another add to the question.
Please.
Generalist, specialist, and a systems thinker. Like a systems.
Okay. I like that.
So
yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes, I wasn't going to say one or the other, because I love a continuum. It's the same idea in the book. I consider my the core differentiators in a pie chart. Or a disc profile or a Myers-Briggs, right? You have certain strengths, areas that you're stronger in, and others that you also can make a difference and need to know when to use those. I think in terms of a direct career, There are certain careers to be specialists in, certain careers, doctors and lawyers and things like that, where you need to be. I'd like the person doing my open heart surgery to be a specialist in that.
Right.
Or my brain surgeon if I need one. I don't want a generalist for that. I want someone who understands the entire human body, but really good at that one thing. On the other hand, there's so many other roles and opportunities. And if you do get narrowed in, you're seeing this with giant layoffs. People are getting laid off that went into coding years ago. And now you have AI and no one needs to code because the computer will do it for you. And now you have, where is the plan B? Where are my supporting skill sets that I have to get the next role or job that I want? So I think while being a specialist has a lot of good qualities and being a specialist in something, I always felt you needed a plan B, and that plan B or plan C or plan D has worked for me in being a generalist or being open to these different ideas. We heard yesterday, they're good friends of Jack were biologists, and he said biologists need to understand about sociology. Similarly, in any career move, when you get in or learn about something, to learn about something else can also bring you a new idea to solving that problem. And so I think somewhere, I don't know if it's systems thinking, but actually having both skill sets can be helpful depending on what you want to do. So I don't know if that
And
exactly.
the team.
And the team, and for the team, and your role on the team.
Right.
So my role on teams has changed everywhere I've been.
Yeah.
I've had a different role. I've understood that role and then tried to use my skill set to create success in that role for myself and others.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Stacey, have you got anything to add on that front? You added the systems thinker.
Yeah.
I'm curious about, do you think people should go more of that systems thinking route, or again, is this a spectrum that
the beauty of systems thinking is, again, to solve complex problems that serve the interests of many. I think Lorri is, she's the quintessential team builder. In her chapter, she talks about a disparate biotech company who needed they were dispersed and they were isolated, and she had this ingenious idea to use the college model of the club affiliation, and she brought the club affiliation model to the company, and they interviewed everybody over a course of a year, found out a selection or a set of categories. I mean, you could speak to this better, of interests, and then brought people together around their interests. And after she left the company, doing successful work, they're now publicizing the biomes. They're called biomes. And they're referencing back in the day, earlier, before, somebody helped us create biomes, and it was Lorri. So it's nice that the essay kind of memorializes your success there, because sometimes we are successful in companies and our thoughts are not kind of memorialized. So it's great. But teams and complementing each other, I think we do have areas of specialty. I mean, that's what gets us excited, is the things that we can contribute that we're naturally inclined to contribute. Those become transferable skills. We can transfer them into other ways. My dad always said about liberal arts education is that your liberal arts education teaches you how to think. And when you know how to think, you can bring that thought process to any, to any organization and to any problem. So I think it's teams, and I think it's systems thinking, and I think it's all of the things that we've just been talking about. There's a great, just as an FYI, there's a great theorist. Her name is Kate Raworth, Raworth, and she writes about the donut economy. And she helps us understand that there are multiple priorities of a sustainable living that need to be considered at the same time. So we need to think about the system in order to take care of the needs of many. So we can't be linear anymore. So I don't know if it's necessarily a generalist or a specialist. We just need to build teams that are mutually responsive, that are ingenious, that are just, and that allow us to be intrinsically motivated, so that we can serve, again, the needs of many.
Definitely. No, 100%. I mean, the way I guess I would articulate it is I think that I wouldn't use the word generalist, but I would say that people need to be adaptable.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that that's why we're seeing these mass layoffs, back to your point, Lorri, right? Is that we are seeing these mass layoffs and we're hearing about this term, the skill gap, right? There's a massive skill gap in the workforce, and people who are being laid off or displaced due to technology aren't skilled to take up any other roles in the organization. And so that's becoming a huge problem. And I think, again, to your point of the liberal arts, we're taught to think, we're taught to be adaptable and to really sit in any room and at least think and understand how to think about any problem. And I think that is the important thing. And I think that is, when I say generalist, is more so what I mean, is like to be adaptable and to be willing to sit in any room discussing any topic, but still be able to have a voice on solving the problem.
So I just a couple things. One is adaptable, and in terms of the conversations that we need to be having, we need to be civil. So civility is a critical quality that has not been taught. We have not developed it, and we're polarized because of it. So I think civility is a really important adaptive quality. But I would also just twist the problem. The problem isn't the layoffs and people not being skilled, right? It's the system that isn't adapting to the needs of changes. And because the bottom line, the almighty bottom line is, the profitability, quarterly earnings, speed and greed. I mean, the system of business, the economy of business right now is the problem. It's not the workforce isn't the problem. The workforce is available. We are ready. We are adaptive. We are willing to be retrained. So it's the problem is that the business structure is not built for the changing economy.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk a little bit about how people should prepare themselves for the future here, right? Because I think everything and all the problems we're talking about right now are only going to get worse, right? I think there's going to be potentially more layoffs as AI and technology continues to advance and people continue to get displaced. What do you think people must be at least doing or advocating, or in which way should they be advocating for themselves to ensure that they will not be displaced by technology in the future?
I can answer that from my seat in HR. Lots of disruption in what work means and where people are working and how people are doing work. Obviously, remote work, it's not like that was new, but now this is some kind of an expectation, or people are looking for, preferring remote work. If you are working remotely, you have to figure out how to make connections, because it's easier to, term people when they're not in the office and not participating or not contributing in some way. And it is harder to be seen and heard that way. Technology has always been, since the Industrial Revolution, a fear of being replaced by technology. Companies like machines. They don't require health coverage. They're not sick. They don't go on FMLA. We are expensive commodities to organizations, and we can't be seen as expensive if we are producing and making that organization better. So, the market keeps shifting to an employee market, to an employer market. And as a future employee, figuring it out where you fit and how you are helping move that business forward and staying connected will be important. The other thing about AI, and we're learning about ChatGPT too, right? You can't write a paper and you have to turn it in if you're a college student, and it will rate how many words or what percentage have been plagiarized. So it is really important to have your own ideas. That's what colleges are telling you. They aren't trying to catch you being lazy. They want to hear your good ideas. And stuff that gets spewed out from AI needs to be reviewed through a critical eye, through an ethical lens, through a sixth-level lens, so that we aren't leaving people out. So we are making the right decisions, not having what's been brought in front of you from the past to create your future. And again, you still need to select what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. And, the technology just gives you the options. But you need to make those decisions that are the right fit at the right time for where you are. So there's a lot going on right now, for sure.
Definitely.